Now the floor is given to Colonel Oleksandr Motuzyanyk, Ministry of Defense of Ukraine spokesperson on ATO-related issues. Welcome. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. During the last 24 hours, the occupation forces of the enemy intensified shellings of the territories that are under control of Ukrainian forces, and this time, in addition to mortars, they were actively using artillery systems that are banned. The enemy aimed its fire with the use of artillery that is banned by Minsk agreements at the peaceful settlements. And the most intense shellings were delivered during dark hours. I would like to present data that show real intents of the occupants. During the last 24 hours, the enemy launched 20 152mm and 17 122mm artillery shells. Also, 123 shells of 120mm of caliber and 62 shells of 82mm of caliber. And now information about the sectors in more detail. The Lugansk sector, the enemy delivered 18 shellings at the positions of Ukrainian armed forces, including 17 precision ones. The heaviest firing impact was made in Svetlodarsk Bulge. Here, the enemy launched 20 shells with the use of artillery of 152mm of caliber near Novolugansk. In the course of shelling that lasted more than 2 hours, the positions of defenders of Luganska, Troitska, Oleksandrovka, Zolote Popasna, and Novotoshkivska were shelled by enemy with the use of mortars of different types, grenade launchers, and small arms. And our servicemen bravely sustained downpours of enemy mines and shells. Ukrainian forces only 6 times were forced to organize measures to suppress firing activity of the occupants, and they used only service weapons. The Donetsk sector. Here, Russian occupation forces violated ceasefire 12 times. The enemy delivered fire that was dense and precision one, and the situation was the most tense in Priazovye. First in the morning, then in the evening, near Vodyane and Shirokine, the enemy delivered intense shelling with the use of artillery of 122mm of caliber and heavy mortars, and also mortar mines of 120mm of caliber blew up at the positions that are held by armed forces of Ukraine near Talakivka, and also all spectrum of infantry weapons were used by the enemy against our servicemen on the approaches of Pavlopil and Gnutova. Anti-tank missile complexes, grenade launchers, and machine guns were used by the enemy near Opatne and Avdiivka. In the morning near Vodyane and late in the evening near Gnutova, enemy opened fire with the use of weaponry of IFVs. And on the approaches to Shirokina, the enemy used anti-aircraft gun. And despite intense firing delivered by the enemy, Ukrainian servicemen only 6 times organized response to the most dangerous provocations of the enemy. And our servicemen used only those types of weapons, weapons that are not banned by the Minsk agreements. And also there is a disturbing trend we've mentioned during the last several days, and knowing well that military crimes committed by pro-Russian forces are thoroughly and clearly documented by Ukrainian forces and international observers. The enemy continue blatant shellings of frontline settlements. During the last 24 hours, the enemy delivered fire at residential quarters of Vodyane, Avdiivka, and Verkhnya-Terets. Unfortunately, in result of these illegal shellings, 31-year-old resident in Verkhnetoretsk was wounded. And on the whole, during the last 24 hours, along the line of confrontation, the enemy delivered 30 shellings of the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine. 29 were precision ones. 12 times Ukrainian servicemen opened fire in return with weapons that are not prohibited by Minsk agreements. In the result of enemy shelling, one Ukrainian serviceman was wounded near Zolote village. 2 more were traumatized in action on the approaches to Opatne and Lugansk. Wounded and traumatized servicemen were promptly delivered to military medical institutions where they were provided with necessary medical assistance. Ukrainian side of JCCC JCCC declared that the actions of the militants do not provide for carrying out humanitarian missions in Travneva and Gladosovo. They try to shift responsibility for disruption of measures to armed forces and non-adherence to international humanitarian law by the militants continue to threaten lives of civilians, and permits and possibility to deliver humanitarian freights to Travneva and Gladosovo to international humanitarian organizations were timely provided by Ukrainian armed forces, but because of mine danger on the roads that can threaten lives, this is mines present a threat to the lives, and the local population suffer because the militants block restoration of infrastructure. Residents of Travneva are left without electricity supply because the electricity supply was stopped by shelling of the militants, and also in Katerinivka, in Luganshina, also the residents face the same situation, and the militants say about that it is inappropriate to repair these facilities, and the conditions, living conditions, deteriorate daily, and also gas supply lines and to gas distributing station also need repairing, those that are in Mariinka and Krasnogorivka and Donetsk. Also, Ukrainian side of JCCC put insinuations of so-called mass media of the separate regions of Donetsk Oblast to rest, those that say that informed that the residents of Gladosovo addressed with open letter the principal deputy chief monitor of OSCE SMM in Ukraine, Oleksandr, and survey carried out show that those people who signed this letter have never resided there, and even without graphology examination, it is seen that signatures are put by one hand. So the militants try to shift the blame on Ukrainian armed forces, and it shows that they want to further escalate the conflict. In Kiev, military lyceum named after Ivan Bagun, they held a yearly ball to mark the Day of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and military lyceum students and the officers and the participants of the area ensemble took part, and performers and artists greeted students of the lyceum and officers, and they were preparing for this ball during 1 month. And in Kharkiv National University of Air Forces, named after Kadrzydub, they had held graduation ceremony for 16 young officers. They successfully completed their training and got qualification and the master degree. And for the first time, the students have experience in flying real and not just training airplanes. And 17 graduates got qualification of the pilot third class, and 12 got gold medals and honorary diplomas, and each fifth continue military dynasty, and they were greeted by Air Force Commander Sergei Drozdov, Commander of National Guard of California State, USA, General David Baldwin, Director of Department of Defense, Mobilization Work and Coordination, and law enforcement bodies of Kharkiv Obl State Administration Alexei Maximov, and head of a veteran organization, and other honorable guests. Thank you.